Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode number 7 of the Recruitment Website Show with me, Mark Wilkinson.
And with me, Keith Devon. How are you doing today, Mark?
I am very well. I have been for my first run today in, I don't know whether I've run this year, actually. I think it might be my first this year. And I feel really good, which is good. I used to do a lot of running, and when I got COVID last year, I kind of stopped then and never really restarted it properly. I sort of went for a few bits and bobs, but never really got back into it. So I'm determined to get back into it now.
You did a mega running year once, didn't you?
I did, yeah. Was it 2017, I think it was? Where I ran over 1,000 miles. I think it was that. Yeah, it was good.
You set yourself a target, didn't you? And then the target kept getting pushed, made bigger and bigger and bigger. And it was like,
yeah. The first target was a mile a day because I'd never run before, really. So I thought if I could do a mile a day, that would be good. And then it became obvious in like about a month that was just going to be ridiculously easy. So then I set a target of running from Land's End to John O'Groats, the distance that was, which I think is about 870 miles or something like that. And then I've managed to complete that. I think it was by like the middle of November. And then it was like, can I do 130 miles before the end of the year to get to 1,000? So I managed it, which was good. So yeah, that's good.
That's cool.
Get into it. Anyway, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm enjoying being here, watching my house getting built. So that's kind of cool. It's come together. Plasterers are in, so it's starting to look like a house from the inside. It's really nice. Although there's always the risk that I'll just lose power and internet at any moment. So if that happens, you're on your own again, Mark, unfortunately.
Oh well, there we go. So today then, we are going to be talking about what do you get for your money and why the sites sometimes cost so much. So we titled this sort of episode £100 versus £100,000 recruitment websites.
Yeah. And
the idea being is that you can get websites for just a massive range of money. You know, you can get websites literally for £100. And if you're starting out, maybe that's what you should be getting. But you can also get websites for very big money. And like, wants to just cover some of the differences that you're going to get and why sometimes websites cost a lot more money than other websites, just so that people have got an understanding of the sorts of processes and things that might happen in the background that you might not be familiar with. So that's what we're going to cover in today's episode. If you are watching along on YouTube live or even on LinkedIn, we'd always appreciate any likes. It really helps the website show, the recruitment website show, get across to more people. So do like the video. If you want to subscribe, please do so as well, and then you can watch the future episodes that we may will be doing. We always do an episode most Wednesdays at 1:30, and that's UK time. So yeah, be good to hear from you. If you've got any comments as well, put them in the comments, and we should be able to get to them. We always like taking questions. So kick us off then, Keith. £100 versus £100,000 websites.
Well, yeah, I thought those are kind of two arbitrary figures, but they are, I think, realistic in some ways ends of the spectrum when it comes to getting websites delivered. You could obviously spend less. You could probably get a website up for free. You could also spend more, and I'm sure some big recruitment agencies have done so. But I thought those were kind of two good numbers, kind of near the ends of either end of the spectrum. So I thought maybe a good thought exercise would be, like, if you had £100, how would you go about getting a website and what could you get for that kind of money? And if you had $100,000, how would you go about that process and kind of what would that look like? And then kind of how do those two differ in terms of the end result? I think that could be interesting just to discuss. So I guess, first of all, if you had £100, Mark, and someone said to you, build a recruitment website, what would you do?
So to clarify, am I building this for someone else and they're paying me £100, or am I a recruiter that's building it and I've got £100 budget?
Pretend you're a recruiter that's building it and you've got £100 to spend.
Okay, so I think what I'd probably do, thinking off the top of my head, is obviously I'm going to have to use some ready-made service. I can't build something myself for that unless I actually do it all myself.
Yeah.
To do that, I would need to know what I'm doing, and I'm going to assume that I don't know what I'm doing because I'm a recruiter and not a website person.
Yeah.
So I can't sort of, get a web server and start doing that sort of stuff because I don't understand that. So therefore, I'm going to have to use some service that's out there. So I'm probably going to be able to use something like Squarespace, Wix, WordPress.com. You could probably get a free one with that, but you might want to pay for some of the sort of enhancements that they offer, like a nice theme, etc. And that kind of involves signing up. It involves doing a lot of it yourself anyway, because you're going to have to log in. You're going to have to pick a template or a theme or something that makes your website look the way it does.
Yeah.
And those sorts of services have lots of those available. Some are free, some of you have to pay for because they're a bit more advanced. That might be where the 100 quid goes. I'm then going to have to add all the content myself and tweak the colours and etc. until it's to my liking. So that's what I'm probably going to do for 100 quid. Would you do the same?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that 100, like I was going to say there, where have you actually spent the money? And I think things like Squarespace cost about 100 quid a year. I think.
Yeah.
So that would be like a hosted DIY website builder approach. I think that's really the only way you're going to get this done. And I guess some of the, well, maybe we'll come back to the drawbacks. Let's come back to the kind of differences afterwards. But yeah, like you've described, it's kind of short and sweet. You choose a tool. So you mentioned Squarespace, Wix, WordPress. There's actually loads of others as well.
Yeah. There's quite a few to choose from, isn't there? I think. And in terms of like your money, it would go on. And what are you paying your 100 quid for? You're paying for the hosting, the backups, the thing that your website runs on. Essentially, it's kind of looked after completely for you. But you are managing the site yourself, the content, everything like that. No one's kind of doing that for you, which is interesting.
And I'd say at that point, you've got to accept that this is very much brochureware in terms of like, there isn't really going to be any particular recruitment focused functionality or any fancy integrations for that kind of price point. Okay, so £100,000. What might that look like, or should I have a crack at that?
I think I'd probably forget the recruitment website and just go on a beach in the Bahamas. If someone gave me that in a suitcase.
Pretend no one's handed you the cash mark. All right, it's in a marketing budget for the year, and you've got 100 grand. But like, how would that process look different? Do you think?
Well, with the 100 quid one, you're very much fitting into what someone else is offering. So those services will have a set offering, essentially. There are customizations, as we've mentioned, but you're going to get something very off the shelf, etc. If you've got £100,000 to spend, and I guess we're using that as just a lot of money. It doesn't really matter. It's 100. It could be 50 grand. It's just a lot. You've got a lot of money. You've got a lot more to spend on it. You can have more of what you want. So you've got the ability to sit and think, right, well, what do I want my website to do? How do I want it to look? How is it going to be better than my competition? And you can actually spend the money on making those decisions yourself rather than being shoehorned into something that might not be right. So you might have to start off with something that we often do, have a discovery session with an agency who's building your website and say, they can get ideas for you. You might have some branding, for example, done to make you a nice brand, whereas with the 100 quid one, I'm just perhaps going to use my, a text-based brand, essentially, rather than having a proper brand built. That could be something to do.
Choose your own colors, choose a font that you like the look of, that kind of thing.
Yes, all of that sort of stuff.
Stage, you probably don't have loads of branded material that all needs to like work together. You might have a business card or something like that, but you might have a cheap logo, but there's not too much that, it's not, brand isn't like as critical at that point.
That's true. you could work with publish articles or content on your website that is going to help bring candidates, clients, and consultants to your business. You might want to look at like user interface, user experience experts to bring options for you, so they can take that brand that you've done, your colours, and your. What else would you put on that list, Keith?
I mean, there's all kinds of experts when you're talking about that kind of money. There's all kinds of experts that you could bring in that you might not have even thought of. One of the more obvious ones is like SEO. So,
yes,
I mean,
very good.
if you're spending that much money on a website, you want to make damn sure that some people are going to see it. So you probably end up working with an SEO agency of some kind. You know, again, you're spending a lot of money on it. You're spending money to get people to it. When they get there, you want the content to be good. So you might be spending money on a copywriter, for like conversion optimized copy, or to write your blog posts and things for you. You might want to spend money on a photographer or an illustrator or something like that for the kind of imagery on the website. You can quickly tell this is all adding up. Then we haven't actually built the site yet. We've only designed it and got the copy and images. So someone needs to build this thing. And at this kind of price point, it is a custom design, so it's a custom build as well. You can't just kind of shoehorn it into a platform like a templated style platform. So you need to build it on top of something that's very kind of flexible. Then there's other kind of expertise around accessibility, which becomes more and more important as your business grows. And arguably, it shouldn't become more and more important, but I think from a legal point of view and a risk point of view, it does. Everyone should be doing the accessibility stuff as well as they can at any level, but in reality and in practice, it does matter more to the bigger companies. On the same kind of vein, you might want to hire some kind of security expert to do like an audit, like a one-off audit or ongoing audits of the project, and work with your web developers. Maybe that's something your web developers do anyway. And then you've got things like hosting. So, £100 a year for Squarespace. It could easily be £100, £1,000 a month for web hosting. Need to think about maintenance contracts and things like that, like who's going to be kind of supporting you on an ongoing basis. And then there's things like we haven't even talked about like functionality like job boards and things like that. Yeah. We haven't talked about multilingual's a massive one. So we've done some multilingual work, and you can almost double the cost of a project if multilingual comes into it. So that's a big one. Then
multilingual is one of those things that it sounds easy. Like every page just needs to be translated into a different language. What's so hard about that? But the sort of nuances and complexity that a multilingual website brings, it is vast in terms of the cost that can sometimes put onto a site, unless it's the most basic of translations and things. Definitely worth thinking about. If you're thinking about multilingual, you will need some pennies.
Absolutely. And there's other ways to approach it. But if you want a full kind of integrated multilingual solution, that is not cheap. And then there's other integrations as well. We haven't talked about like custom integrations with CRMs or job posting services or newsletter tools or marketing automation tools and all these things. So every time you're adding kind of like something custom and you want to do things a very specific way, you're adding cost.
Absolutely.
I don't know how many points we covered there, but like say it's, I don't know, 12 or something. Each one of those areas doesn't get a huge budget at that point. So you can see how, it might sound like a lot, but you can see how things quickly add up. We've worked on a project before where the web development phase alone was about 40K. So that did include multilingual. It did include some custom integrations, but that's not us doing any of the, we did some design, but not like the majority of the design was taken care of. We are not doing any copywriting for that. We're not doing any kind of we obviously didn't do any photography or anything for that. So you can see like the numbers can very quickly add up. So
yeah, if you take those 12, let's guess there's 12 things there. Obviously, that's what, like £9,000 each if you're going to spend £100,000. And you think, £8,000 on branding, it's not cheap. But it's not a lot either in a way. Like you could companies spend a lot more than that. So actually, when you think about it, you could even double that, and then get something really cool. There's an infinite number of money you could spend on each of these, I guess.
So I guess the £100,000 question is, why would you spend that amount of money? Like, what are you getting? Like, we talked about a process, but a process isn't results. So what are you actually getting for your business when you spend £100,000? What's going to be better about that website than the £100 version that we talked about at the start?
Well, that's a good question. And I think it depends how far down that process you're going to go. I would assume that most recruitment businesses wouldn't need every one of those things in that list.
Agreed.
And why would you need all those things on that list? The answer to that is probably because you are at a size where you need to outdo your competitors, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And therefore, you need to be better in every one of those areas than your competitors are. And it becomes a bit of an arms race in that you need to spend more on SEO because you need to get higher in the rankings and you need to, outdo your competitors. So the hope is that you're going to do that by spending more money and committing more time and energy and effort into those different areas. Your website is going to perform better for your business than your competitors are. Rather than picking something that's £100 from, one of those providers that we've found before, and it's unlikely that you're going to be able to outdo your competitors using those tools where you're very, very, very restricted in what you can actually do.
Yeah. I think in the right hands, you can get a really long way with lower budgets. But it's, especially from a design point of view, things get pretty bad pretty quickly.
Yeah.
You can join Squarespace and pick one of their really beautiful templates, but as soon as the average person gets their hands on some design controls, things can go pretty badly wrong. And then it's just some of that functionality. Like, you can't, as far as I'm aware, Squarespace doesn't do job boards. So as soon as you need a job board, I think you're automatically at that kind of next level up, and you're talking, probably about £100 a month plus from that point on for the job board side of things. Again, you could technically do it for free, especially with WordPress.
Yep.
One of the many advantages of WordPress. Install WordPress effectively for free. Download one of the job board plugins, and you could have a really good crack at it. But again, it's time, it's expertise. What happens when things go wrong? What happens when things don't work quite the way you expected? It's probably not going to look particularly pretty, but maybe that doesn't matter at that lower stage. So, yeah, I think that's a kind of good intermediate price point. Is kind of £100 a month is probably where you're starting at when you're talking about maybe a proper recruitment website, and that seems to be where a lot of the recruitment website vendors kind of pitch themselves.
Yeah, that's a level.
Around that level.
I think if you're starting out, if you're literally just starting out a recruitment company, of which you're one of 30-odd thousand in the UK at the moment, then I mean, maybe £100 isn't enough, but I wouldn't be committing lots and lots of money to it. Test the water, get something up, get a one-page site up that puts your presence out there with some information about who you are and what you do and who you do it for.
Yeah.
And then, see if that happens. And if you've got the ability to add other pages to that where you can drive traffic maybe from social media towards it, do that. And then once that starts to pick up and you're gaining customers and so forth, then you can start to think, well, how can that work better and harder for me? Do you see a lot of startups who throw a lot into the website, too early, really. You need to sort of test the water and see how it goes, I think, before you sort of really start to commit lots of money to it, and see what you've got. That's just my personal opinion, rather than jumping in both feet when you're not really sure, A, if it's going to be successful, and B, like what you actually need. Having starting out with something small and then making your business work for a few months and then seeing what areas you need to get better at, a website being one of them, will help you then to work out which direction you need to go. And the answer is probably that you don't need most of those things that we've listed out on that list for the £100,000 website. But there might be one glaringly obvious bit that you think, yeah, I do need to spend some money on that because that's where my problem is. For example, is it SEO that you're struggling with? Are you struggling to get traction from people coming to your site because you're not ranking for the right keywords for the services and the customers that you offer? It might be therefore worth spending money on SEO for the website rather than copywriting and accessibility and security audits, for example.
Yeah, I'd probably argue I would spend money on copywriting before I spent money on SEO. Because if there's no point in spending money on SEO if when they get there the copy's rubbish. But it depends how good a copywriter you are. We obviously interface with a lot of recruitment websites, and some of it's really poor. You can tell it's a bit of a DIY effort, and the design's not quite right. The text doesn't really read particularly well, or it's too wordy, or it's not wordy enough, or it's very kind of them focused rather than kind of their clients and candidate focused, and lots of these obvious little problems that I think you wouldn't want to go and spend loads and loads of money driving traffic to that website because that website's not good enough in the first place. So there's that kind of chicken and egg thing as well.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Cool.
Yeah.
Anything else to add?
I guess benefits of the £100 version. I don't know. I'm just trying to think.
Yeah.
Because we sit between these two extremes, obviously, like the websites that we do. But there are some benefits, and there is sometimes it's like you said, when you're a startup, you don't need all these things right away. If you're only dealing with 5 jobs, you don't need a job board, for example.
Yeah.
You could create a page manually for each job on Squarespace, and delete them when they're filled and whatever. Yeah. There's ways around it, or just not have them on the site at all. They're fast as well. That's one of the advantages. Super, super quick. And the other thing I'd say, a lot of money gets spent on design. And one of the things that we highlighted there was UX, which is user experience. And that is the process of kind of coming up with, I guess wireframing is one of the main UX tools. So you kind of do sort of sketches of what the web pages will look like and where certain elements of those pages will be, and how one page will flow through to the next page. And the logo will go up here, and then there'll be a navigation here, then there'll be some breadcrumbs here, then there'll be a pagination here. And part of it, you have to be a very particular type of company with a particular type of requirements to really have to go through that stage. Because for me, websites are kind of they're not a solved problem, but they're, we have best practices, logo in the top corner, navigation along the side to the right of it. If it's a job board, you've got your facets down the left-hand side and then a list of jobs down the right. You've got breadcrumbs in certain places. You've got hero sections. You've got footer at the bottom. These things are kind of solved, and we don't need to reinvent it every time.
I agree. I think there's too many people dive into those things when you don't really need them, because take navigation on a website. If you land on a website, you will automatically go to the same place that everybody else does to look for the menu. You'll go straight to the top. And if you can't see a horizontal menu, the next thing you'll do, I would imagine, is you will look in the top right corner for the word menu or some sort of hamburger icon.
Yeah.
So if your UX process has decided that those two things aren't right, there must be a very good reason why that's not the case. I can find it very hard that would ever come out of that process. That would always be the case, really, because our brains are just trained to use websites in a specific way, essentially.
Yeah.
I'm not saying there aren't instances where that isn't the case. You know, shops are probably, e-commerce is probably a different experience for user experience than it is for just reading copy. You know, there's certain things you want to put in place. But again, I would argue e-commerce is very similar. Doesn't really matter what you're selling. There are always exceptions, but most shops and e-commerce things are the same, if that makes sense, in terms of the UX. For a good reason, because they work.
Yeah.
You know, this is interesting. But
yeah, so just I guess the moral of that story is spend your money wisely, you know, and don't, you know, think about what you're spending it on and what you're prioritizing within that process. And maybe you don't, you know, need to spend money. I said to you before the show, like, you don't need a professional photographer. You know, there's lots of good stock imagery, lots of good free stock imagery, but choose carefully. And people's phones these days are amazing. Like, you can take great team portraits with an iPhone or like a Samsung, whatever, with a nice background, and just put it in portrait mode, get the team to line up, bang, 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 bang. You know, that's saved you hundreds or thousands of pounds right there. Like, it might not be quite as good as a professional photographer, but it'll be good enough for a certain price bracket and a certain size of business and all that stuff. So
just about deciding what is that sweet spot to spend what budget you have on it, I think is important.
Well, hopefully that was useful to some people. I certainly found that quite a good thought exercise, as like what the two extremes might look like. So hopefully that's been useful. If you enjoyed the show, like Mark says, give us a like, subscribe if you want to. That would be great, and means we can keep putting out shows like this for you. We, like Mark said, we'll try to do one a week from now on. We've got lots and lots to talk about in the future. So please do join us for a future episode. And that's all from today. Thanks very much.
See you again. Bye-bye.